All right, Jake Burns is with us. Jake, you alluded to it, and we've talked about it, and Odell Beckham has talked about it. Although, for one, I just hope he stops worrying about Detroit. About New York rather. Nobody here cares about New York, and he should be made aware of that. But how did if Eli Manning in fact held him back? How did he hold him back?
Well, it's a topic I didn't want to keep hashing out either necessarily, but I do think when you're looking at what he can become as a factor in this Browns offense, you do have to look at where he was restricted last year. So I had some statistics I put in that article which said that Beckham's throwing the ball 20 yards downfield, where a guy like him is explosive, fast, in and out of cuts, can be most effective. That's where Eli really held him back. And this is not to knock Eli Manning as a player. The guy has accomplished so many things in his career. He's got 2 Super Bowls under his belt. But as you age, the arm strength begins to diminish a little bit. And that's where Eli really struggled. He actually finished 40th out of 45 quarterbacks in adjusted completion percentage on balls thrown 20 yards downfield. So that's telling you not just to Beckham, but to all of his wide receivers. He's truly struggling to complete the ball deep downfield for a multitude of reasons, including inaccuracies and underthrows and things of that nature. And the Giants only pushed targets down to the field to Beckham of 20 yards or more, and a player of the caliber of receiver that he's ranked up. For example, Julio Jones of the Atlanta Falcons had 65 such targets last year. So you can see why there's an interesting sort of lack of opportunity based on the skill of the player. And I think that is something that the Browns look at and they think that they can capitalize on, because Baker Mayfield was 5th in the league on balls thrown 20 yards downfield in terms of accuracy, and he was most effective as Beckham on the slant route, and the slant route is that one-step drive inside at a 45-degree angle. And Eli Manning didn't get him the ball on frame or in stride, but 50% of the time. So imagine that, Les. Only 50% of the time that he would be thrown targets was it on stride, meaning in his running motion, or in his frame of body to be caught. And that's a problem for a wide receiver if you never know where the ball is going to arrive. Well, that's where Mayfield thrives. He was one of the best throwers of the slant route, and in terms of being on, he was a top 10 quarterback in the league in terms of accuracy based on where the ball arrives in the wide receiver's frame. So if you add up the deep targets, you add up the accuracy on those throws in terms of keeping it in an accurate window, you see where you could push Beckham into the top 1 or 2 wide receivers in the league.
All right, so let's look at the big picture. Is it a case where Pat Shurmur, who did not coach Eli Manning when he won the Super Bowls, and Dave Gettleman, the GM, wasn't there either? So are they afraid to go up to Eli and say, look, it's time to reevaluate yourself, and we have to either move you or ask you to retire or find another place to go? Are they afraid of him? Because I would think you'd rather have Beckham than Eli at this particular moment.
I absolutely think that you would rather have Beckham as a premier player at his skill position. I'm not sure. It feels like if you talk to the people who are involved with the Giants, it's 2 years past the time they would have thought it's to move on from Eli. But I don't think that they've had the player there that they feel comfortable with. They've had Geno Smith, who really struggled. They had Davis Webb, who was not the player they hoped he would be. And now they've moved on to Daniel Jones. So maybe they start Eli this year, they feel it out, and they decide maybe that this is time to give Daniel Jones, the 6th overall pick, an opportunity to play. It just feels like they haven't adequately replaced him, Les. Like, I do think the time has come and gone. It is clearly an issue for Eli to be a top-flight quarterback in the league, and the Giants have just sort of missed their window of opportunity to comfortably move on. Now it's just a lingering problem, one in which became such a problem with Odell Beckham last year that he couldn't tolerate it anymore, being underthrown, under-targeted in the certain situations on the field, and he could see where that frustration boiled over. I just think he was ready for a new quarterback, a new situation, and I think the right situation is here in Cleveland.
All right, going down the road here, and again, I mentioned I don't care about New York here, but does a guy like Eli Manning with those 2 Super Bowl rings, does he earn the right to call the shots and when it's over, even if I don't want to say he's embarrassing himself, but he's certainly a shell of what he was in those 2 times that he won Super Bowls. Has he earned the right in New York to be the man still?
I mean, I respect Eli Manning like crazy. I'm not sure if he's earned the right to do any of those things. I mean, it seems like other than Tom Brady, who continues to just play at an elite level, Drew Brees, these guys who age like fine wine and continue to compete, Phillip Rivers at an elite level, if the play diminishes like we've seen from Eli over the last 3 years, most of the time those franchises cut bait with those players, whether it was Brett Favre, to the point where it got there with Dan Marino that he retired. It's just like, it just feels like this thing has lingered farther on than it should have been lingering. And I'm not sure to answer that question, Les. I do think he probably has earned the right of when to hang him up, but the Giants as a franchise have just sort of allowed him to hang around and continue to be a part of things. And I think it caused a front office change a few years back.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And now that I think about it, Bill Belichick invented it when they came up with diminished skills. That's what he was aiming at, so he wouldn't be stuck with Bernie.
Yeah, absolutely. I recall that being I was a young kid at that time, but I've read about it as much as I can read about it from guys who went through it at that time. But that was a hot button topic in Cleveland, and rightfully so. They were looking for, how do you improve your football team against the diminishing skill of age of a quarterback? Now, in the modern age, with how they're protecting quarterbacks, you can see guys who are playing into their 40s and playing extremely well.
At a high
And that's
level.
the hope, is exactly that you hope you have with somebody like Baker Mayfield for the Browns, is you have a guy who can play. He's only 24, can play the next 15 years until he approaches 40, but it cannot be in the way that Eli Manning is playing and being a real obvious problem within your offense.
All right.